Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak with Confidence, a podcast brought to you by Princeton Toastmasters. I'm your host, Ritu Kaul, and a part of this vibrant community of public speakers. In this podcast, we explore the art and craft of communication and unravel insights and techniques that make people better communicators. On our podcast today, we have a very special guest, Todd Greenwood. Todd is not only a seasoned Toastmaster, but Todd has also initiated a lot of communication and leadership programs to help people become effective speakers, to be able to speak with impact. Todd, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Ritu. Thank you. It's an honor to be asked to be part of this really worthy program that you're doing.
Thank you, Todd. This is a program that all of us are enriching together as members of Princeton Toastmasters. And as you would concur, we have some terrific members who have got such depth of experience in communication that I don't like to call them members. They're communication experts like yourself. Every time I see you on the stage at Princeton Toastmasters, I think there is so much to learn from you. You also have a funny bone, so we all enjoy when you're up on the stage, and we can clearly make out that you're so passionate about communication itself and enabling that for people.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, no, I am passionate about what we do at Princeton Toastmasters, and the Toastmasters program has just been transformational for everybody that I see around, including myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move into a lot of areas that we would like to hear about, how about you give us a small background about yourself and also about how Toastmasters happened to you?
Boy, New Yorker by birth, grew up in Queens, went to school in the New York City school system, then left for university, studied architecture, studied design. Um, Met my wife a week after I graduated from undergraduate school, Pratt Institute in industrial design. We then lived in Manhattan. We lived in California. We lived in Japan for a year.
Wow.
And then after being in Japan, I really loved what I was doing, which was teaching English. And I realized that I had this passion for the idea of not just designing things, but designing programs and designing education. So I went back to school. Well, actually studied for the graduate record exam, the GREs, in Japan, um, and took the test in Tokyo, and then entered the university and graduate school in Indiana. And that was an exciting period of my life. I had two young children and in graduate school, uh, 7 years, got my PhD in instructional technology, which is the design of instruction. And and then I combined that with public health, and I started working in my career, which had to do with basically designing health experiences for helping patients. It's now called digital health, but I can tell you in the year 2000, if you had said digital health, people would have scratched their head and said, "What are you talking about?" So the
Right.
world has marched on, and now everyone talks about AI. And here we are. Uh, I loved my career. Um, my wife and I have now been together and married for 42 years. And
Wow.
yeah, exactly. And we have changed our life in many ways in the last year. Both of us are passionate about learning Spanish, about speaking Spanish. Uh, it's been a life-changing experience for the two of us. And so we decided last year that we would live half of our life, half of our year abroad in Spanish-speaking countries. So we're doing this thing where we're renting out our house for 2 months, then we're going to Mexico for 2 months, then we're coming back for 2 months. Then in April, we're going to Spain for 2 months. And, each time it's really about not just tourism, but it's really about cultural immersion. I think we're just like passionate about the idea of learning about different people, learning about different places, speaking Spanish, going beyond the superficial and really soaking it all in.
Wow. Can I trade my life with you? That is so exciting. That is so exciting. But well said, how you see a place uh, through a cultural immersion is very different than when you go as a tourist. I mean, you don't even scratch the surface, I feel many times. And I like the idea. You're going with the theme. You're learning to, and you and me were talking about it. You're learning to speak Spanish, but you're now going to these Spanish-speaking countries where the cultural immersion and the context become deeper. And I think that's where language also has relevance and nuances. So that's wonderful thing that you are doing. Tell me in this entire journey and versatile things that you do, when did Toastmaster happen to you? And what was the initiation at that time? Because you're talking about the fact that you were so deep into education, building frameworks. So I would assume that somebody like you would already be deeply entrenched into the art of communication. How did
Hmm.
Toastmasters come about for you? And then what was that experience like?
Rita, that's a great question. And this, the question of I think that there's a difference between, the idea of communicating or either written communication or designing sort of an educational curriculum and what it takes to be a good presenter, what it takes to actually communicate on stage. And I remember one of my mentor, he was my mentor, he was the head of my dissertation committee, Vic Strecker, and he was just, and he is still alive, an incredible communicator. He was able to get up in front of a room full of people and just command with his personality, his ability to take really complex concepts and make them simple and have everyone sort of engaged and laughing. And I thought, oh my God, I'll never, ever, ever be able to be like that. And I decided to go into industry instead of academia. And not 100%, but some percentage of the decision to do that was based on the idea that I was just more comfortable with the idea of sitting maybe in a, in a conference room with colleagues talking about ideas versus the concept of standing in front of a room full of students and delivering a lecture. I came to Princeton. It was the year 2000. I was offered a job here and immediately wanted to be here for all of the wonderful reasons. Princeton is a magical place. And it really is. And it's interesting. In Mexico, they have this idea of magical communities. And well, I come from a magical community. Princeton is a magical place. So when we came here in the year 2000, I didn't know anybody. And I didn't have any kind of connection socially. And frankly, the whole idea of speaking had been sort of right there and sort of it'd been part of what I needed to do next in my life. But I didn't know it. And of course, you know, my wife, she is a person who is constantly has her tentacles out for new things and new opportunities. And she said, "Hey, Todd, why don't you go check that out? Toastmasters." Like, okay. And I came into our basement. I think
Yeah.
I think it was a couple of days after Thanksgiving in the year 2000, and some of the same veteran members, who are known to our club were there, and they took me under their wing, put their arm around me, and said, "This is a place for you." And that's what I felt. I felt immediately welcomed, felt immediately part of the community. I took leadership positions very quickly, and was the president of the club in, I think it was 2004. It was maybe
Hmm.
about 3 years after I first joined. And it was a tremendous experience for me because I had never thought about the idea that I could be the titular head, but also, helping to sort of lead for the club, a group of people, a group of colleagues, adults. It had never entered my mind that that notion of a leader, of a leadership, was something that I had within me. I was really it was an enormous change for me. Many of the changes, and I think everyone in Toastmasters can relate to this, many of the changes are internal changes. Sure, we learn skills, right? But really what happens is what happens inside of us, who we think we are, who we had believed we were, who we had believed we could do. And now, it's like you look at yourself, it's like, here I am in front of this group of people, and here I am feeling comfortable with this new definition of myself as a leader. And I loved it. And I thought, not only is this something that feels so comfortable for me, but it truly does sort of change the notion of who I am. So anyway, that's in short what happened for me as I joined this club.
You joined and stayed for life, which I see a lot of people doing. And I think that's the power of the Toastmaster community. But I would also say that's the Princeton Toastmasters Club. I have personally experienced it. You could go to a lot of forums to better your communication skills or speak with impact. But I think the environment which is so cohesive and enabling and welcoming and cheering for you is very unique to Toastmasters. It's unique to Princeton Toastmasters too, because I find a lot of members like you who have joined, let's say 20 years back, 15 years back, 25 years back, still participating and giving back as if it's been just 4 or 5 years when they become leaders within this community. I haven't seen that gone down. I don't see that enthusiasm fade away. In fact, I see a lot of people are no longer pursuing a pathway, obviously, because some of them have become DDMs and whatnot, and become speakers with impact. So I think the need to speak with impact or learn the skill happens, but then happens over time. But then people still continue that journey because you like that environment. It's all about personal growth. You meet like-minded people, but you're also, with that experience, able to give back so much. Identify when new members come in, what their hesitation could be and how they can be on this path. And that's what makes Toastmasters special. That's what makes Princeton Toastmasters special too. And I love the fact that you touched upon leadership. I see that happening with a lot of people that, communication is very closely related to leadership. I truly believe that. And a part of that is definitely related to how you see yourself. Do you see yourself as a person who's a seeker? Then you come across very differently in your communication. When you see yourself as somebody who's enabled, who's
Mhm.
opened up fully, who doesn't have constraints, your whole demeanor and how you speak changes. And speaking confidently is really about that transformation. So I
Right.
really love the
Right.
fact that you touched upon that. Todd, I also wanted to talk to you about storytelling because you're somebody who has, we were discussing this earlier, who has a funny bone, but
Mhm.
who also has engaging stories every time you're on the stage, you're talking to people. Like you're full of stories. I remember that. I'm just reminded of my favorite author's book called Quiver Full of Arrows. You have a quiver full of stories.
Uh,
Whenever I look at you, I'm reminded of that. So I wanted to focus a part of our podcast today on the craft of storytelling.
certainly.
And I would certainly like to start with, for our viewers, what, in your opinion, is storytelling? How would you
Yeah.
define storytelling?
Before we go to that question, let me touch upon. I think, the reason why I love storytelling so much is a couple of things. One is I do come from a family of people who like to tell stories. I like to bring that forth. I love talking about myself. Maybe it's a little egotistical, but we have the best stories come from who we are and from our lives and our childhood. And I would say the other aspect that of storytelling that is so important to me, and really it has to do with Toastmasters in general, is the idea of creativity. The idea that in storytelling, we have the opportunity to create something new, to bring forth something of who we are, and brings forth something that we perhaps even didn't see for ourselves before, in a new way. And and that is the essence of creativity, right? You know, when we suddenly created something that wasn't there before. There are ways of telling stories that are fairly rote, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's certainly the way you start. Uh, but with really good storytelling, what you really have is this idea that you have changed kind of the space in the room, and you've also presented something new about yourself in a way that, again, you look and you say, wow, I didn't see that about myself before I started. But when I finished that story, that's like, I have now sort of incorporated a new reality of who I am into to who I am. I started with the idea that there were ways of that we should be able to um, tell stories when it was probably about 20 years ago when a good friend of mine who I met in Toastmasters and I went to the Moth. And the Moth is, for those who don't know, is one of the longest running podcast series, radio programs on the idea of personal storytelling. What is personal storytelling? It's no notes, first person. It is the idea of authenticity, an overused word, but it's about telling your own truth. And that to me has always been essential for my concept of storytelling, which is, to come from your emotional truth, to tell something that is true for you, and to bring that forth. And with really good moth stories or personal first person stories, what you have is the essence that someone has sort of brought out a kernel of who they are in a way, and has let that exude into the space of their story. We went to the Moth. It's such a fun event. It's actually a contest event where you tell stories, and there may be some alcohol involved. I don't remember anymore, but there definitely is this idea that you're telling a 5 to 7 minute story. Wow, who 5 to 7 minutes? We know that quite well, and and it's about a theme. That's the Moth, and different than oftentimes what happens in Toastmasters. Where in Toastmasters, we're looking for the theme. We're looking to sort of incorporate, the moral or the theme or the lesson into our speech. There's something different about simply telling a story of something that happened to you, perhaps getting a laugh, perhaps getting a tear, uh, perhaps getting people who, gasp a little bit. But that's the notion is that you've created that through your story an emotional impact for people. And I do believe that it's an art that is completely a teachable art. It's something that is often unappreciated, but it's a really important part of what is available in Toastmasters as well.
So, Todd, thank you for taking us through that. concept of storytelling, and also the moth, I think, which is the highest level of storytelling that you can find. So thanks for sharing that. But tell me something that storytelling doesn't come naturally to people. I'd also like us to touch upon for viewers. How do two speeches, public speaking, pieces look like, one without a story, one with a story, maybe equally impactful content, right, on something. How, what is the difference between the two? I mean, do you really need storytelling?
Let me suggest that for anything that is going to be remembered, it's anchored with story. Not saying that, if we're in our business meetings and we have our PowerPoints up, we may not have story involved in that. But anytime that we're on the stage and we're trying to communicate, a a well-placed story is going to be the thing that anchors people's memory of what it is
Right.
that you said. And there's no place more clear than with table topics, where the notion of with a story or without a story makes all the difference in the world. Anytime I've gone to a table topics contest, it's those people who can incorporate even a mini story into that 2 minute, minute and a half response. Those are the winners. Uh, the reality is we all have stories. The ability to bring out that those stories into, especially table topics, which is unplanned. I've done workshops where the focus is how do you actually bring a memory into your table topics to start with? Huh, every story starts with a memory. So that when you're asked about, tell me about a time when everything seemed easy. You know, when I work with the kids, like, I've been asked a very interesting question. Tell me about a time when everything seemed easy. Okay, that's very nice. But, as adults, we need to start with we need to start with the image. Like, what happens when you're asked that question? Do you freeze? Well, you always do. But what comes into your mind, right? And if you can take a breath, allow yourself to be opened up to a moment, and then start with the moment. There I was. There I was in Thailand. The year was 1978. And suddenly I saw in front of me three monks walking past. It's like, okay, you've created a story. I've created a place. I've created a moment. I've created something that happened. I am then just drawn into what you're saying. It doesn't even matter if the rest of the table topics is not that great. I've now been drawn into your story,
Right.
and that is the essence of what we should be doing in Toastmasters is bringing people into our lives, bringing people into our stories, and table topics is an enormously powerful place to start with that.
Right. Well, that's interesting that you say that anybody who wants to learn the art of storytelling in Toastmasters should actually look at practicing table topics, because that's a good place to start. And that's a very good tip you're given to our members and viewers. Faced with a table topic challenge, think of a context, think of a story, and start with that. I think you also answered my question when I asked that what's the difference between the two pieces of speech, one without a story and one with a story. I think the power of drawing people in, getting their attention, is very critical in today's time. And there might be multiple speakers at an event. We are living in an era which has got information overload, as I call it.
Right.
So how do you draw people into something that you're talking about? I think storytelling is that one segue which draws people completely. Now they're curious. They're with you. They want to be inside that story with you. So that's interesting. Todd, also tell me that, there are people who are good storytellers. You can hone it over time, you can learn that art. But it really starts with one very simple problem, I think, for a lot of people, which is how do you find stories from your life? Because you think that I mean, a lot of people would think that they are doing the mundane, the everyday thing. And therefore, I think that it involves the art of also understanding there's a story in everyday life that
That's
you
right.
can pick up. What do you have to say about that?
What do I have to say about that? I think that what I have to say about it is that it's important to do some kind of writing, some kind of journaling. I think it's important to sort of appreciate frankly, your memories. You know, uh, it's easy to let them go away and to not appreciate the fact that yes, I mean we do live every day with the opportunity to really sort of either see things around us or remember how the things around us actually connect to parts of our past. Um, I guess I agree that there are people who are better at storytelling than others. I had the enormous pleasure of having in high school, one of my teachers was the writer Frank McCourt, the man who wrote Angela's Ashes. And let me tell you, if there was a person who was a born storyteller, that was Frank McCourt. Every day we used to come into English class and he would basically be practicing Angela's Ashes in front of the class. He essentially workshopped the entire book
Oh,
for
wow.
many years in front of his English students. But he was a natural storyteller, and he certainly knew how to bring forth the things that were from his past. But he did that with the addition of constantly writing. He was writing. He didn't actually write Angela's Ashes until he retired, but in many ways, he was writing it before he retired by actually just writing every day and working it with his students. I think that there's a lesson in that, which is that we all can be more involved in sort of bringing forth our memories through writing and frankly through Toastmasters. What a great place to actually just be practicing it. And there is no right and wrong. It really is about practicing.
Right. So this brings me to my next question of how, beyond Toastmasters, how people can start building up their storytelling skills. So one is obviously attend a workshop. That's a good starting point, and we'll delve into that. Second is when you have a club and you have an opportunity to speak somewhere, try to incorporate storytelling. But let's say these two are not readily available, because it's a journey. It's not something people will learn in a quick fix in 15 days. What are some of the steps that people can have that where they can, build this skill? One is obviously journaling, like you talked about. Are there any other practical tips that you can give for our viewers on building storytelling techniques?
I mean, it really depends a bit on your family structure too. I mean, I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know what happens when you go home, but for me, when the family is together around the table, it really becomes an opportunity to tell stories. And sometimes those stories are embellished, but don't tell my kids. Because
Okay.
because they think it's all 100% true.
Right.
But that's certainly the place where stories are important as well around the family. Um, my nana, my mother's mother, was just the most voracious storyteller, and it seemed as though would tell these stories, and every year as she grew older, those stories changed a little and got a little more embellished and a little more implausible. But she was the most infectious storyteller. It was really wonderful. I think, there are formal places where we tell stories, and then there are informal places where we tell stories. And stories take all kinds of different forms depending upon where we are. And I don't think that people should get, hung up with either the notion of like, oh my God, I don't have a good place to tell stories, or I don't have stories. You know what? I mean, those are all just stories we tell ourselves about
Okay.
about our ability to tell stories. But for everyone who's listening to this podcast, know that Toastmasters, whether it's the Princeton Club or another club, is the place to do that. I have right now two clubs, Princeton, and I'm a proud member of the Cervantes Toastmasters Club, which is 100% en español. It's a Spanish,
Okay.
yeah, it's a Spanish club, and it takes me outside my comfort zone for sure because I don't understand everything that's going on in that club. But it's also another opportunity to tell some stories to the best of my ability in Spanish. I want to touch on Cervantes for a minute because I think the other part of being a Toastmaster over the last 25 years has been the true appreciation and respect that I have for people who come into a club where English is not their first language. And
Right.
it wasn't until I started learning Spanish 7 years ago, 6 years ago, that this came even more just just more present and clear for me that this is a an ongoing language learning, whether it's my own language or Spanish or any other language, is a a constant process. It's never done. And yet, there is enormous amount of respect that I give for people who are speaking where English is not their first language because the challenges are multiple, for speaking in another language. I see that giving speeches in Spanish in Cervantes. Um, it's given me just a profound respect for the members in our club who do it in English and do it so well and do it with humor and do it with just elegance. So I wanted to say that.
Right. And I love the fact that you've not stopped at the fact that you're a wonderful seasoned speaker, you're a communication expert, but you've gone and challenged yourself further by joining a Toastmasters club in Spanish. Oh my God. That requires applaud. Todd, seriously. But tell us about your master classes on storytelling. I would love to tell our viewers a bit about what you do for
Yes,
enabling people to be better communicators.
yes, and we don't have one scheduled now, but do write me and I'll give you the email address. Last year we did a series of master classes called the Stories That Shape Me. And the concept is it's a full day workshop on storytelling in which we're looking to really develop for ourselves the stories that really created who we are, almost that core stories that we have available that are, about those moments, about those incidents in our lives, about those turning points in our lives that actually created who we are today, and really doing that from to honor them, to honor those moments, because frankly, again, if I was to ask you, Ritu, about those, what were some of those most important moments that made Ritu Ritu? Those are the things that, frankly, I want to know about. But oftentimes we're not really prepared to talk about those things because we haven't really given ourselves the permission to develop that story. So the notion of the workshop is how can we take, how can we take those pivotal moments and turn them into stories that give power, respect, and honored to those to who we are right now, uh, acknowledging sort of the challenges that we've gone through to get here. So it's a the structure of the day is there's nothing quote unquote magic about it, but it is quite structured. It kind of takes those tools of my instructional technology in the past and really brings forth a kind of a method for being able to produce a story that we all then share with one another on the stage. It's authenticity. It can be quite emotional, it can be cathartic, and it can be, funny as well. So it's a full day workshop. It's called The Stories That Shape Us. And you can find out more about it by emailing me, and I guess we can put this in some kind of thing here, but you can email me at toddg147, toddg147 at gmail.com. That's TODDG147 at gmail.com.
So thank you for sharing that with us. And when is the next set of workshops slated this year? Is something scheduled out
Nothing
there?
is scheduled yet, but given our travel schedule, it would be in the summer. So it would be in July.
All right. All right. No,
Yep.
that's enough heads up for people at the club or anybody, listening and tuning into this podcast to write to you. It's been very interesting talking to you, Todd, about a lot of things today, about your journey, about your Toastmasters journey, the leadership within Toastmasters, and the craft of storytelling. This has been very, very interesting.
For me as
For
well.
all the viewers, we are not letting Todd go right now. We will have a part two of this conversation about Young Leaders program that is he has initiated, which has become a movement today. So
Right.
stay tuned for the next episode. Bye on this episode for you, Todd.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritu. I really appreciate it.